Hi, hello, and welcome, and happy Thanksgiving to my American people. That's people that are American. I don't know why I needed to define that. But today is Thanksgiving, of course, throughout the United States. And what better time, therefore, to do a video on 5 things I didn't know about Thanksgiving before moving to the United States. So put the giblets down, get a shot of brandy, you're probably going to need it, and watch my top 5. I've always known that Americans celebrate Thanksgiving at this time of year, mainly because of the film Planes, Trains and Automobiles. I'm not saying that that's why you celebrate it. I'm saying that that's why I know that you celebrate it. Sorry, that was all confusing. But I didn't really understand what the celebration was about. But it turns out that it's really just a harvest festival, much like the harvest festival that we have in the United Kingdom. And then during that time, I remember when I was a kid, I'd go to my local church, right? And I'd take all of this sort of tinned food, which would then be distributed to people less fortunate than myself. That's what that was. And it was sort of this giving of thanks in its own right. But the thing is about the UK's Harvest Festival is it's not so celebrated on a widespread scale as Thanksgiving is here. In fact, until just recently, I'd almost forgotten it existed. It was something I very much did as a kid. But then as I got older, it was something that got off my radar, But here in America, Thanksgiving is the numero one holiday for my money. I think it is the best of all of the national holidays in the United States. You get to eat a lot of food, but it also happens that November is my favorite month in general because that's when I was born. And that's the most important thing here. And speaking of timing, that brings us on to point number 2. Don't know why I'm pointing. That's rude. So it's the 4th Thursday in November, and I think, instinctively when I was growing up and I was watching wrestling that has the Survivor Series every November around Thanksgiving, I think I thought that it just had its own date. Like Christmas Day is December 25th. I think I just thought Thanksgiving was November 21st or something like that. Never really looked it up, And it's only after here I got to learn that rule, that it is the 4th Thursday of November. But it hasn't always been the case. This is something else I've come to find through my own reading and curiosity on the subject. The 4th Thursday rule was implemented by FDR back in 1941, and prior to that, back in the 19th century, it had been held on the last Thursday in November, and sometimes there is a distinction to be made between the 4th and the last. You can have 5 Thursdays in a given November. In fact, we're going to have that in this very month. The problem was that, when President Lincoln was trying to get this implemented nationwide to where it would be celebrated on the last Thursday of November, a lot of the Confederate states were like, no, we're not doing that. We've got our own rules, right? Damn it, we're going to stick to those. So it never really became something that was fully standardized until after the Civil War. And at that time, the standard was the last Thursday. But FDR didn't like that, and he changed it, and the 4th Thursday is what we have to this very day. Now, speaking of changing the date of Thanksgiving, that brings me on to point number 3. So no pointing this time. Yes, Canada celebrates Thanksgiving, but it doesn't just celebrate it, it celebrates it earlier than America. In October, it used to celebrate it in November, around about November 6th, I think it was, but they had to change that because, and this was after the war, it sort of coincided with Armistice Day. Right, so they didn't want the days to be so close to each other, so they brought it back to October, and that's what they stick with now. I think, a lot like with a lot of things that America and Canada do, I think growing up I just assumed that they both celebrated Thanksgiving, and that might be quite naive of me. It's just in the same way that I imagine they had Christmas Day the same day as they do, and that they probably both celebrated Boxing Day, but only one of them does, and that is Canada. So again, they depart from the Americans on a lot of these things because it's a different country. You don't expect them, you shouldn't expect them to do things the same. But in my head, I always did. I don't know why. So sorry about that, Canada and America. I lumped you all together because you sometimes speak with similar accents. People do that to me and Australians all the time. So it's just me getting my own back. And before you guys do jump on me in the comments, do know that I've been punished enough. And I've been punished enough by this next entry. I'll never forget it. I'd literally been in the country a matter of days in 2008, November 2008. That's when I moved here. I had my first Thanksgiving. Absolutely loved it. You know, who doesn't? You know, lots of food and a pint of sherry. Not a pint. It probably was. It was a pint. It was too much, actually. To the point that the next day, when I was woken up to go and stand outside of Target to go and get some discount DVDs on Black Friday, I was cursing everybody in sight. You know, using British slang so nobody knew, because it was the Black Friday sales. This was a concept at the time that was unknown to me. We didn't have anything like that in the UK at the time that I lived there. I have heard that it's transcended over to the UK now, and it's madness. We even now celebrate it on the exact same day as America, which is interesting. But yeah, it was madness. It was freezing cold outside. It was also 5 a.m. That's dedication on the part of consumers to start queuing up at that time. And I'm British, you know, I'm supposed to like a good queue, but not at that time and not at that temperature and not with that hangover. It was mainly the hangover that did it. But what got me about it was just this mass competition for merchandise. I think that was my first rude awakening into the sort of capitalist structure of America. It was like being in a zoo. You know, I in fact did see some droppings at one point, just from a baby. I don't know why the baby was there, but it was. And I had a headache for the next 5 days. Again, that was from the sherry, but, you know, it was nonetheless exacerbated, I'm sure, by the sight of a baby pooing in Target. But my Black Friday shopping days are now thankfully history, much like our next and final entry. So, you know, in terms of America, I think I always wondered where the idea of Thanksgiving always came from. I mean, it's good to give thanks, right? You think that sort of instinctively we'd choose to do such a thing. But it actually goes back to the Pilgrims, the likes of me. You know, not me, that would be historically inaccurate. But, you know, my English forebears and the like, when they came over here to New England, right? So they had a harvest feast over there. We used to giving thanks, you know, as part of their church services. And it sort of just came into being. However, there are stories, I think, of Virginians going back, of having also done this, and you know there are competing theories as to when was the first Thanksgiving, you know, festival, as it were. So it's all quite confusing, but all that to say that it does go back to a very specific period in history, and that would be the 1600s. So in other words, it's actually been a national holiday for a shorter amount of time than it wasn't a national holiday before it. And that right there is 5 things I didn't know about Thanksgiving before moving to America. You can get back to your giblets now. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Bye.